It is the attitude of our society that animals are pets or things. And so we don't take care of our pets and our animal population in society. But what infuriates me is that, on a set, we're being paid to have these animals do something. So to then be inhumane to them just seems like you have no care for animals at all.
Hi everyone, welcome to MythBarkers, where we make dog parenting easier by sniffing out the facts and debunking dog tales. We are just a few episodes in, we're already learning so much, and we hope you're feeling the same way. Today we're going to be talking all about working pets, and our special guest today is a pioneer in this space and has been training animals for over 40 years.
Bill Berloni is an incredible animal behaviorist, a humanitarian, an author. He's trained all kinds of animals. I'm just reading his latest book now, Broadway Tales, and it's amazing. Just the types of animals: dogs, cats, goats, pigs, etc.
Wow.
He has 3 credits on Broadway, which is just so impressive. And he was presented with a Tony Award back in 2011 for excellence in theater, and he's the only animal trainer to ever receive a Tony honor, which is just
That's
remarkable.
incredible.
He's an expert in the animal space, animal behaviors, training, but also does so much in the rescue space. So we're really excited to talk to him. Bill, thanks for joining us and welcome to MythBarkers.
It's my pleasure, and I'm glad somebody's finally busting all these myths about pets.
Oh, there are so many.
Mhm.
A
We're
lot of
educating. It's great.
misinformation. So, Bill, let's get into it because we really want to talk about you and, introduce you to our audience. And I'm reading your book. I think some people haven't heard your backstory. I understand you were originally actually an actor. You were trained as an actor, right, in college, and you were looking to get your actor's equity card. And I think that's how you fell into the industry of training animals. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I never wanted to be an animal trainer. In high school, I decided I wanted to go into acting. And I wanted to be around professional actors and actually learn the business. So there's a theater here in central Connecticut called the Goodspeed Opera House, which is a theater that's been dedicated to the American musical. They've done revivals, but introduced new shows like Man of La Mancha and Shenandoah. And so I got accepted as a technical apprentice, which meant we got to build scenery for 70 hours a week for no money. And then
Lucky
run the
you.
show. Yeah, I mean, so a 19-year-old is like it was great fun, and so I learned a lot because there were a lot of New York actors. And my second season there, the summer of '76, the new show they were introducing was a play that had a dog in it, and it was the last show of the season. And when they started preparing for it, and it got to the dog part, they called the trainers in New York City. They were too expensive. They went to the paid staff members, the guys who were being paid to build the sets, and they all threatened to quit. So the producer needed someone he could trick into doing it. I was called to his office, all of my 19-year-old self, and he sat me down and he said, Bill, how would you like a part in one of our shows and your equity card, which is the union card? And in that moment, I was kind of stunned. Like he recognized my acting abilities by the way I've been building scenery. I mean, I was like, well, thank you so much. And he said, all you have to do is find and train the dog for the new show. And I was like, okay. I mean, you sell your soul to the devil to get into show business. And it
Oh,
took me
yeah.
about a week to realize that what I had agreed to. And again, I was the only one who would say yes. That was the only qualification I had. He gave me $35, buy the dog and feed it all summer in the summer of
Wow.
'76. And someone said they had cheap animals at the animal shelters. And at that point, I had had dogs, but we got them from pet shops, and I had never been to an animal shelter. And so one day I started looking for this dog, and as I went to shelters around Connecticut, my heart was broken because the conditions under which they were being kept was terrible, and I just didn't know we treated our dogs that way. And I ended up at a shelter called the Connecticut Humane Society and found a little dog who matched the description, but he was going to be put to sleep the next day. And I didn't know what that meant. And when they explained it to me, again, mortified that,
Right.
dogs had expiration dates. And if they didn't get homes, they would be euthanized. And I didn't have enough money to adopt him. It was $7 and I had $3 in my pocket and they kicked me out. And so I went back to the theater. The director was out of town. The producer was out of town. Nobody would okay this dog. I was just bemoaning what I had seen. Ultimately, my roommate said, idiot, here's the $4. Go back tomorrow morning. When they open, get the dog, which is what I did. And that the show was Annie, obviously, and it was
Wow.
the original Sandy. Uh, you know, how did I train him? I made him think the theater was his home and we were all his family, and he got used to being on stage. And when the little girl showed up to start rehearsing, the thing that happens with kids and dogs,
Mm.
they sort of fell in love with each other. So when we got to running the show, I wasn't necessarily telling Sandy to go on stage. He was going to someone he already knew and liked,
Oh, I
and was getting
love
treats
that.
for it. So my show was good, did what they needed to do. And I moved to New York City to start my acting lessons with Stella Adler at New York University. And 6 months later, Mike Nichols' office called, famous director producer, and said the director of Annie was insisting that we get Sandy back, and would I be interested in working on the Broadway production? And I thought, any way to work with Mike Nichols and make money on Broadway? Sure, I'll be an animal trainer. And so we put the show back up. It opened April 21st of 1977, became a huge success, and I became a world famous animal trainer at the age of 20,
Wow.
and been making it up ever since. It's based on
I love that.
a simple principle, positive reinforcement. Treat animals kindly, and they'll work with you.
Mm, mm. Uh, that's an incredible story. What a consequential $4 loan that was.
Yep. Yep.
And you saved
And
his life and changed
Yeah.
his life, and they change yours sometimes even more than you change theirs, I think.
Well, and that was the thing. I mean, I was petting this dog, and then he was going to die the next day.
mm,
It was hard to comprehend.
yeah.
And as I walked away, I made a promise to myself that when I grew up, if I ever got a dog, I would rescue it from an animal shelter. Made that promise that day. So I'm probably around 300 dogs that we've saved over the last 47 years.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
really impressive. So you've been a professional dog behaviorist for theater, movie, film, TV for 40 years. What would you say is the most enjoyable part of that?
Obviously, the most enjoyable part of that is when it works,
Mm,
because then all the effort we've put into creating that happy situation for the animal has come together, which is not always the case.
mm,
Um, Sometimes I'm just okay with it. And then sometimes I'm thrilled by it and happy. In the case of Broadway, I've done 33 Broadway shows. And so I sort of set a standard now how animals are treated. In the film industry, there are no standards. They're
yeah.
considered inanimate objects that are props. And so
Oh,
the way that
wow.
the film industry treats animals is a lot different than the way the theater treats them. So when you can get that shot and the animal is like great, that's the best part. I get the best feeling then.
Mm. Oh, that's very enlightening. I didn't know there was such a disparage between the way the theater and movies treated their animals on set.
I'm the reason Broadway treats animals well,
Mm,
because I insist on it. But the myth that we should bust is that there's no protection for animals in entertainment. Zero, zilch. There's no laws. There's no unions that we can join. So we have collective bargaining and negotiations. We have nobody to complain to, and if we do complain, the producers don't call us back. In addition, because we don't have a union, we're all bidding against each other to get the job, which keeps the
mm.
rates low. But more importantly, they're considered inanimate objects, and I have to bust that myth every time I go on a set, and it isn't always easy.
Yeah,
That's so
absolutely.
shocking. Because, I think we're used to watching TV and film. You see that disclaimer, right? No animals are harmed in the film. And you'd think that there was a third party governing body, something that was saying there are standards to make sure the animals are protected. But you're saying that there isn't. That's really eye opening.
Well, there is a group in LA called the American Humane Association. They started back in Hollywood when horses were being abused. And they come on set as a third party witness. And, if no animal is harmed, they give you a seal. And they've been successful in over the years at least being there. If I say to a director, we can't do this shot, I'm not going to get hired back again. They say it and they have to listen, but they have no law enforcement rights. And it's hard. They're hired by the studio to come and watch. So if you complain too much about a Disney film, they're probably not going to be asked back again.
Mm.
So there's
Hmm.
a little bit of conflict of interest there. It's like,
I agree
um,
with that.
I
That should
love
be
them.
third party.
I love them. And actually, sometimes my rules are stricter than theirs, but they're not always there. Indie films don't have American Humane. Commercials don't have American Humane. TV shows don't have American Humane. Just the film industry and not all the films. So
What would you say is your guide? How do you think we could do better in those opportunities?
it is the attitude of our society that animals are pets or things. And so we don't take care of our pets and our animal population in society. Having it done on a set is going to be hard to do. But what
Yeah.
infuriates me is that, on a set, we're being paid to have these animals do something. So to then be inhumane to them just seems like you have no care for animals at all. We all sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. So
Hmm.
if we see something illegal, we can't tell the authorities because we've signed an NDA. So
Wow.
again, it's just the animal trainer against the studio.
I see.
And again, I'm fortunate enough to have a career in which I'd say 50% of the people I work with listen, and the other 50% I don't. I try not to work with.
Yeah. Oh man. So, do you currently have animals in your house as well?
Currently, there's 24 dogs here.
24 dogs. That's
Are
incredible.
they all previous working
Show
dogs?
dogs.
Have they all been show dogs in one capacity?
Yeah, there are the young ones who are learning how to be a trained dog. There are the ones who are working, paying the mortgage, and then there are the ones who are retired, who are just living out their best lives with us.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and they're in different groups. In 2015, we did a reality show for Discovery called "From Wags to Riches" with Bill Berloni. Only reason I mention that is because they came to the house and filmed. You could see how we live here because the house is designed to live with many animals in a humane way. I was very proud of that because Discovery thought we were role models. And I'm sure if you search the internet, you would not find footage of where Lassie lives or where any other performing animals live.
Yeah.
Why is that? It's an interesting story. I mean, why wouldn't an
Because,
animal?
arguably that's great content to cover,
Yeah.
but I'm sure a lot of people would hesitate to reveal the conditions behind it.
Right. So unless you have something to hide, you wouldn't allow it.
Mm.
But we were like, come on in. And for 6 months, it was great working at home.
Can we get a full picture? Because I'm sure it's not just the dogs. What else do you have in your farm
Um,
right now?
Currently, one, two, three cats, three donkeys.
Wow.
We had a pig, he passed away. We had a geese, they passed away. Who
Mm.
knows what the spring will bring out there? The other thing is that when I get a job, I'll hire experts. I'm not an expert in every creature and their behavior. We have horse trainers, we have entomologists, we have sheep people who we'll work with on a set. Like I'll hire
Mm.
them so that we don't have to have every type of animal here. And so we don't get really exotic things, but anything that's domesticated, sometimes we'll have fun with.
That's really fascinating because we've spoken to dog behaviorists. I'm sure that process is so different working with each species. Can you tell us a little bit about the differences between the species and the approach?
Sure, absolutely. I'm called a behaviorist. I'm self taught. I have no degree, I have no letters behind my name. But I grew up on a farm as an only child. And there are pictures of me with my collie, my cat, and a rabbit, literally in the front yard. And I remember having this great childhood with these animals. So I must have realized that if you treated animals badly, they wouldn't play with you. So I learned how to go, well, how do you play dog games? How do you play cat games? And so my philosophy is other centered. So
Mm.
when I meet an animal, my first thought is, who are you? What can I do to please you? What motivates you? What scares you? And whatever species that is, if you go in with that attitude, you learn what that animal needs at that moment, as opposed to understanding the complete behavior of sheep. I get a generalized thing and I work with that animal individually. And it's easy. Either they do what you want or they don't. And when they don't, you're trying to figure out why. Because
Mm.
any creature will follow something for survival or entertainment. So if it's not
Yeah.
one of those two, well, they're probably not going to work for you.
Such a good takeaway. I think even all of us dog parents out here could really take away understanding what our dogs need and want and listening to them versus asking them or telling them to do something, forcing them to do things.
Here's one. It's my personal opinion that aggressive dogs are biting out of fear.
Mm.
The
Yeah, I believe
canine
that too.
the canine pack structure does not include being aggressive. There is an alpha dog who controls it, and he's the biggest and largest, but he doesn't walk around biting everybody. So why would an animal learn to bite humans? Probably because it had to defend itself. I mean,
Absolutely.
I would never harm anybody, but if someone was attacking my wife, I would pick up a chair and hit them. So what happened to that dog that pushed him to the point where they finally used aggression to get their way? But it's always about the dogs are the aggressor. Well, but who taught them how to be aggressive?
Yeah, yeah. I always have a qualm about that, especially around, when there's breeds that are called aggressive, and then you look at their history and you see that they were trained to fight by human beings, and then all of a sudden we're like, why are they so aggressive? It's like, well, they weren't born like that. They were put in these conditions where they had no control and they were pitted against each other. It's not their fault. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And also, when you were talking about you as a 3-year-old with your farm animals, I was thinking you probably internalized something at that time when you were 3 years old in observation and instinct around animals, because you yourself were so young and you were probably learning a language. And because you had these animals around, you had this unspoken language of observation.
Yep, exactly. And when I went to kindergarten, I was a mess because I was more comfortable with my animals than I were with other children. And I couldn't wait to go home and be with my dog because he was like my brother. I mean, people who love dogs know what that feeling is.
Yep.
And it was the way I was brought up. And so when this opportunity fell in my lap, it's like, well, how can I replicate that? Especially in the theater world.
Why do you think it was? You were working on set and then you were asked to work with an animal? When you, as a person, were naturally so inclined towards animals, I find that to be a really amazing coincidence.
Well, the people at the theater didn't know that. I exhibited it or talked about it. There's fate and karma involved. I'm sure of that. And so, yeah, I was led to the right path and I guess made the right choices.
So we're all about debunking myths and getting to the bottom of common misconceptions about dogs at MythBarkers.
There's another myth I think I'd love to get your thoughts on, because a lot of people have this misperception in show business that we're forcing animals to work, we're forcing dogs to work. Dogs don't want to work. How do you know if a dog or an animal is going to be a good performer and that they actually do enjoy this versus us forcing it upon them?
Well, and again, I'm going to go back to my beginnings. There's an audience of 1,500 people out there. If the dog doesn't do it, everybody's going to know. And yet Sandy did the show for 8 years, 2,331 performances.
My goodness.
Why would an animal do that if it didn't enjoy what it was doing? He was part of a pack. They're part of a pack of the actors and crew. There are repetitive behaviors where they get really nice rewards, and then we keep them happy and safe and rested. So instead of being loved by 2 family members in a home, they go to a place where they're loved by 20 or 30. So from my point of view, it's a positive thing. But who is right for that? And that's a great question, because there are some animal trainers who say you can train any dog. And my reply to that is, well, then you should be able to train any human, do any task.
Fair point.
I'm sure you too could learn how to tap dance, but you may not have the personality, the background to want to be a Broadway tap dancer. So when I go to a shelter, and this is advice for all the people who are listening, if you're looking for a good dog from the shelter, number one, if the dog is hanging out and just sort of chilling, saying and is cool with it, that's good. If the dog is friendly, if it just comes up and jumps all over me and licks my face and, it's like very outgoing to a stranger. And B, I whip out some cookies and they'll sit to get a cookie, or they're food motivated. Those are the dogs that I choose, because if they're dealing with the stress of an animal shelter, the smell of urine and the barking, the confinement, putting them on a stage isn't going to be any more stressful than that. And if they could deal with that, the stress of a shelter, they're probably going to be a really calm dog when you get them home. If they're outgoing, then they probably don't have any abuse issues, because canines are normally social creatures. So I don't have to worry about that. And then finally, if they're food motivated, that's where I know I can teach them more things. People give treats for no reason, and they go out and buy really expensive treats. Treats in the training world have value. So if you give a high-end treat to a dog for just looking cute, then what do you do to motivate them to learn how to sit or come when you call? So those are my 3 criteria: cleanliness, treats. And if people want to get a dog, go to the shelter and get that dog. My famous line is, anybody could have come in and adopted that dog before I did. The one you see on stage, you could have had that dog in your home. I just taught it how to do a couple tricks. So that's my advice to people.
So you answer the question, how do you know if a dog is going to be a good performer?
Yep.
It was those traits.
Those traits, that's what I look for.
That's amazing.
Have you ever hired an animal and realized that they aren't too keen about doing the acting or following the script that they have to perform?
Yes. I would say 3 or 4%, knock on wood. The thing is, when an animal doesn't want to perform, they're done. We don't put it forward. I recently did a show called Left on 10th, which was on Broadway by an author by the name of Delia Ephron, and it starred Juliana Margulies and Peter Gallagher. And they needed 2 Malteses. And we adopted 1 Maltese from a shelter and 1 was from a puppy mill, little white dog named Dulcie. And she came to rehearsal and she loved doing the rehearsal with the actors. We got to the stage and we were doing the technical part of it, all the lights and scenery. She was okay with that. But when the audience came, it was overwhelming for her. It was so foreign. She was like looking at them and like, I don't know if I like this. And by the fourth performance, I turned to the director and producer and said, we have to replace her. Panic came over their faces because we had just spent months training this dog to do this role. And I said, well, listen, I have a dog who can walk in and take over the show tomorrow. And they were like, really? I said, yeah, trust me. And so, Dulcie left after the fourth performance. When a dog in the beginning stages isn't enjoying it, we'll rehome them. Otherwise, they come back and be 1 out of 27 for the rest of their lives, as opposed to being one special pet in a home. Well, anyway, we do the dogs for Wizard of Oz. I have a Toto dog. Her name is Nessa Rose. She's done 800 or 900 performances of the Wizard of Oz all over the country. Literally, she came in, we showed her the moves, which are pretty simple, and she went on that night. It was perfect. And at that point, the producer wanted to hide the fact the dog was unsuccessful. I'm like, no, publicize the fact that we cared that the dog was unhappy, and we did something immediately to remedy that.
Yeah.
And in my book, Broadway Tales, there are probably stories about that as well.
I have it right here.
About the ones who didn't make it, and then we rehomed. So
a previous guest is a trainer and a behaviorist, and she was curious to ask you, how do you keep the dog on cue or prepare for when they're going to go rogue in a live setting? Because you're in a theater, you can't necessarily stop the production. How do you handle a scenario like that?
Interestingly enough, that's not normally a problem. Think about service dogs that work for us. They really enjoy it. If you train them right, they really enjoy it. And obviously a service dog has to be 100% right all the time, or they're going to lead their owner into some danger. So there is a drive within dogs in the right circumstance and the right breed to want to participate and be part of that. Now, you would think the theater is a wild place, but there's the stage and then there's the orchestra pit. So there's usually 8 or 10 feet between the animals and the audience, and they never interact with them. So they learn to ignore them. Number 2, it's repetitive behaviors. We do the same thing every night. And so it becomes very simple for the dog to know, oh, if I go here, I get a treat. I go there, I get a treat. So they're usually unflappable, except when an actor may not give them the cue correctly. Now, a person with cognitive thought process will cover for their co-star. A dog looks at them, looks at me in the wings, and then walks off stage like, what should I do?
We did not rehearse this, Bill.
We did not rehearse this, or if there's something's out of place or there's a loud noise. But even then, I wouldn't want an animal to really be bewildered. And so every behavior has a what if. What if the dog doesn't come to you? And we actually train the actors to be trainers because they're in full control. So they have ways to get them back into the pattern so they don't just sit there lost. And by doing that, they're showing that whatever that distraction was or whatever, it's okay. You don't have to worry about it. So it's actually a very easy thing to do with animals on stage. On films, you have to have a super dog. You have to have the dog that will, do anything, anywhere, anytime for anybody. Those highly trained, wonderful performing dogs that you see on, America's Got Talent and all that sort of stuff. Those are the dogs that you really need to sort of bring to set, because you can't really control the environment and there's no consistency. So that's where you can do it. You can fix it until you get it right, but they have to be willing to roll with a completely crazy environment.
Right. Wow. There's like all different tiers of the level of show dogs.
Yep.
So my next question is, if one of our listeners believes that they have a dog with show potential, what is the advice that you would give them?
All of the work for performing animals happens in LA or New York. So you have to live near that area. Hollywood, with my career and my credits, won't bring me to work out there. Why? Because there are trainers out there. Why would they import somebody from New York when they've got trainers out there anyways? So you may have the cutest dog in the world, but they ain't going to pay you to come to New York and put you up in a hotel. So you've got to be near either New York, LA, and Atlanta is starting to pick up with a lot of filming. You have to work with some sort of agent. And in the same way there's unscrupulous trainers, there's unscrupulous animal agents, because they get the calls for the animals, and then we provide them. So there's a number of agencies in New York. There's a number of agencies in LA. I can't walk down the street. Everybody stops and looks at my dog and should be in show business. And it's a really cute dog. And we call the owner and go, are you available to do this? Yes. Is your dog trained? No. But it doesn't matter. Your dog has to be trained. It has to know how to sit and stay and come when you call it, and be all those things. Even
Yeah.
for the simplest of sets, it has to have that. And with us, if we see you yank a chain to correct a dog, no thanks. So for us, you have to also train humanely, because again, my whole philosophy is they have to want to do it, and if somebody's forcing them to do it, then it's not going to work.
I also think that translates. Like when a dog is doing something because they're positively motivated, you can feel it, versus a dog that is doing it because they're either threatened or controlled. So the vibe they give off, the energy they give off is definitely something that I believe audiences pick up quickly.
Yep. I tend not to watch entertainment with animals in it. I do it all day, so I don't want to come home and then see more animals. But when I do, I look at the ears, I look at the tail, and I look to see if they're panting. Because if an animal is sitting there doing any one of those three things, they're stressed.
Right.
That's good to
So
know.
that's something for your audience to look for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you see a dog panting a lot, it's an air-conditioned studio, number one. So why is it panting? Number two, if it's 90 degrees outside, then the dog should be kept cool until you bring it out and shoot it so that it doesn't overheat. People think when ears go back, oh, aren't they so cute? So yeah, you could see in entertainment too, in a lot of stuff where the animal may not be happy being there. But when you see it, when you do see it, when you see it on stage, because it's live on stage, or when you see it in a film, it truly enhances what we're watching about the human-animal bond.
That's beautiful.
I love your approach of training the actors on set to work with the animals, as well as the approach of training audiences to look out for these things. Because then we can see which animal productions are treating the animals right or not based on their body language. And I think if enough people are aware of this kind of behavior response, then it will shift the industry as people observe and they say, actually, this dog is panting, their ears are back, they look really uncomfortable, and the way that you think about the production then changes. So I love this.
Well, and go back to what I said earlier. There's no union. So they put us, all the agents, we're bidding with each other to get the lowest rate.
Yeah.
Someone who's just starting out in the business who may not be experienced is going to charge half of what we would charge. And you get what you pay for. So sending someone who doesn't have the experience because they're cheap is also not good. My biggest rule is, ignorance is the biggest form of cruelty. If you don't know how to have a dog, don't get a dog. If you don't know how to train, don't put your dog in that situation. If you're not a behaviorist, don't take a dog with behavior problems, because the fact that you don't have that knowledge, you're going to be doing things that aren't necessarily correct for that species, that breed, which is why we always hire the experts. Anybody can go out and get a horse or whatever and try to train it, but why? When they're really experts in that field. So yeah, it's not just because people are mean. You get what you pay for.
I think that applies to regular dog parents too. If you are having problems, don't try to figure it out yourself. There's so many resources out there.
That's right.
Ask for help, hire experts. This is what we want to do too, is just help people further their relationship with their dogs and help their dogs be the happiest, healthiest versions of themselves.
And if you go to a class or a trainer and they're yanking their chains and being overly aggressive, find another trainer, because it is proven, whether it's clicker training or there's a number of positive reinforcement trainers. If you want to help your animal, find somebody who will do it kindly.
Yeah. Kindness, observation, instinct. These are great things to know for our dogs and our animals.
So we understand you're very involved in the Humane Society of New York. How did that happen and what do you do with them?
How it happened was when Annie opened and Sandy became this big celebrity, I wanted to help shelters. So I started just volunteering his image, our appearances at whatever shelter needed to raise money. In New York City, around the country, that was just something we did. And in New York, I was working with them all. And then the Humane Society of New York is a no-kill shelter, been around for 100 years, was financially less viable than the ASPCA, Bidawee, than some other larger groups. And so I started helping them more. And then one day they said to me, would you come over and help us with training some dogs? I was like, sure. And then that turned into years. And then that turned into me assessing every dog that comes in and approving every dog that goes out. And because it's
Wow.
a no-kill shelter, I can do it remotely sometimes, but if we adopt out 2 or 3 dogs a week, it's not like a kill shelter where there's a big turnover. So I can do it, still do my profession, and then find time to help them out. And so 10 years ago, they gave me a title, and I've just remained doing it because I believe it helps society.
Absolutely.
In a big way. I think the people that end up rescuing these dogs would have a very special appreciation for the care as well as the matchmaking because, as you said, the personality and the situation of the household that adopts the dog has to match what the dog needs, and its symbiotic relationship is always going to be successful.
Yeah, and it's fun too because nobody recognizes who I am. So people come in and I help them out and I go to their home, do the home visit, all that sort of stuff. And afterwards, the executive director will say to them, "Do you know who he is?" And it's great because I don't want people. I just want them to think I'm giving them good advice.
Mm.
So yeah, that feeds my soul.
And then do they ask you after they find out who you are for show dog advice?
No, but this is going to sound crazy. You could look it up, but if you adopt a dog from us, I give free training advice for the life of the dog.
Wow.
Really?
And
Wow.
my cell phone is not ringing off the hook with the 10,000 animals that I've helped adopt in the last 30 years. Because again, if you make that right match, yes, there's some questions when they first come, but then I hear from them 10 years later when they're geriatric and now things are changing and how do I deal with this? So
Mm.
it's pretty cool.
That is a lot that you're giving away, and I really admire that because it's definitely having an impact not only on the dogs but on all of the people as well.
As an adoption coordinator myself, I get so emotional about making those matches and seeing then when the dogs are thriving in their forever homes with their families and you see the impact not only on the dog but the family, how
Yeah.
much
Yeah,
joy and love.
but it's also like people come in their 70s and they want a puppy, and I'm the guy who has to say to them, you may not live as long as the dog, and
Mm.
it would be abandoned again. So why don't we look at a 5 or 6 or 7 year old dog?
Mm.
Enjoy the next 5 or 6 years. Yeah, people of certain income don't get a dog that needs to be groomed because grooming is
Mm.
expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, so again, holding that mirror up to people and helping them understand what really would work, and then seeing it work is great.
It's so
Yeah.
needed, so valuable. Well, Bill, we could talk to you all day. I, I'm so inspired and just in awe of all the work that you do, both in the theater and entertainment, but even more so with the Humane Society of New York. That's just so generous, and I know the impact that you're making. So thank you very much for joining us.
I'll give you one more mythbuster. I was talking at the Historical Museum of New York last week, and we did a Q&A. And one of the questions was, are you afraid that AI is going to take over and you're going to be out of a job? And I said, yes, and I hope it does. And the audience pulled
Mm.
back. And I said, let me explain that. For years, we haven't treated animals well in this situation. And CGI came along, which was expensive. And studios started doing that because it was cheaper than hiring a real tiger. So it's computer generated. But now with AI, images are so easily made that if we can prevent animals from being put in that stressful situation, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Because if we can't control the laws to protect them, then let's just stop doing it. Let computers do the work and let the animals be animals. So yeah, personally as a trainer, I love it when certain jobs are done and they're going to computer generated.
Especially some of the more like dangerous, riskier ones. It would be
The
nice to
Greatest
not put
Showman. You
him in
remember The
that.
Greatest Showman, the Hugh Jackman circus film?
Yeah.
They called me and I did the dog that belonged to Queen Victoria. And the first question I asked them was, "Are you using real animals?" And they said, "No, we don't believe in that. Everything in that film is computer generated. All the lions, tigers, all that sort of stuff." It's like, cool. I'm with you. So
Wow.
some productions really do look for that, and those are the ones we should support.
Yeah. That is it's a very fresh perspective because I thought that your response to that answer would be no. But the fact that it is yes, it's enlightening to first the way that the productions treat animals. And so it's like if we're not willing to add to the laws to protect them, then it's almost like we don't deserve to have them on set if we're not going to treat them right.
And no director, producer, nobody wants to harm animals, but it is such an expensive, quick business that people have to do their job or get fired. That's just the nature of that business. And I can understand why it may cost you a little bit more money if you're kinder to the animals, but who cares? You're spending $300 million to do this film. Spend another $1,000 and give me a day of rehearsal. So again, I don't want people to think that the people themselves are cruel. It's just that particular industry. And so if we can't make it safer, then we shouldn't, like you said, shouldn't do it.
They don't have a voice. We're their voice for them. We have
Right.
to
Or they're
stand up
advocate,
and
exactly.
advocate for them. Yeah.
No animal walks up to me and says, hey, I want to be in show business and work, 12-hour days.
Right.
And so if I'm asking someone to be part of my life, I want to take care of them. And that's the secret to my success.
That's very wise. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. I will say I've learned a lot about the industry and sort of the different industries as well, and all of the things that it takes to have a successful show production.
Yeah, I mean, I like theater because every night 1,500 people are watching your work, and if they don't like it, they're going to let you know. So, the animals are out in the public. On a closed set, you never know what happens. So
Right.
it's just a different thing.
A lot to think about. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bill.
My pleasure. My goodness.
It was lovely to meet you.
When I heard Mythbusters, I was like, oh, here's a place where I might be able to get some of my secrets out. So
We appreciate you sharing those secrets with us, and we'll keep them between us, but also share them with everyone listening and watching.
And get people thinking.
Yes, absolutely. We have to tell our audience to look out for those 3 telltale signs.
Yeah, those 3 telltale signs, and you may get the star of your new family before I do. Because if you don't take them, I'm going to take them.
So. Thank you so much, Bill.
You're welcome.
For everyone joining us, you can follow Bill and Berloni Theatrical Animals on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you all for tuning in again, and stay tuned for our next episode of MythBarkers.